You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 305 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
Hope springs eternal, Jeremy, and it's the first day of spring, so there's a lot of hope in the air.
Boy, there is, and we're heading to the end of spring training. We're coming off of a tremendous finish to the World Baseball Classic. And what a success that turned out to be. I'm so happy for it. It turns out everybody likes competitive baseball, and everybody loves when something means something and the best players in the world are playing for it. And that was a fantastic
except for the American pitching staff, which I don't know if I call them the best in the world, but or in America even.
You sure could have fielded a better. Yeah, I bet they wish they had put together a little bit better of a pitching roster. That's for sure.
Do you think that the reason why it was so exciting for people was because of all the one-game elimination games?
I think that is part of it, and I think that it's such a collection of superstars. I mean, it's the American lineup was insane. A lot of the Japanese stars are stars you see in major league rosters or are going to see on major league rosters. So I think there was a lot of appeal to this being a big deal tournament. And we haven't had, the last time we saw competitive baseball was October, and so I think got people's juices flowing.
I'm going to say we haven't seen competitive baseball at Wrigley in like 4 years, but okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, no, that's
I follow.
To be assumed. Yeah.
I think the other thing, though, I think about the World Baseball Classic was I think people in other countries probably found it even more compelling because, it was their national team, right? And I think the difference with us, at least with me anyway, is that I didn't like most of the players on our team because it seems like they were all Cardinals. I like players on the other teams because I don't view players based on like my nation, right? I view players based on my city, my team, the Cubs, right? And I don't care where they're from, I mean, whether it's, Javier Baez or Bryant or Rizzo or, that part of it, Wilson Contreras, that part of it never really resonated as much because we're so fortunate that these guys play in front of us all year, 6 months out of the year, every year. So we get that benefit. But if you're Japanese and you live in Japan, having some of your heroes who have left to go to the U.S., playing for your national team, I think probably carries more. I don't know. It probably resonates more with them than maybe it does with a lot of us.
And seeing teams like Mexico have the success they did, as well as Japan, this is where you continue to grow the game, right? And just look at the guys on the Great Britain team, even like they had they won a game and there was a lot of coverage. So that's exactly where MLB is trying to grow the game with their London games every season. And so this is what you want to see, and it turns out, hey, ratings are great when baseball is entertaining and competitive. People watch it, and it's not the sky's falling when it's a 162 game regular season, and the lineups leave a lot to be desired, and there's other things going on in the summer. There's a lot of the ratings talk is not that big of a deal, but I think
it's hard to compare a one-game elimination with either a 162-game season or even, it's more like it's like playing a Game 7 every of the World Series every day. I think it's a lot more akin to the NCAA tournament, frankly, in that sense, right? It's
right.
Every day could be your last, basically, and there's no break. Like at least in baseball, you win a tough 7-game playoff series, and then you start another one that's also 7 games. So even if you come out flat in the first game, you can rebound. Whereas in a tournament like this, every game it can be the end. So
No, and that's how you see Darvish setting up for Shohei Ohtani against
right.
Mike Trout in the last at bat. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's definitely a fun time. And we move on to talking about the Chicago Cubs, and we've got a special guest joining us this week to help us talk about all of the roster moves, all of the end of spring training, helping to preview the regular season as we march towards another Cubs season beginning. Longtime friend of the show, please welcome on. You know him from NBC Chicago. He's also one of the co-hosts of the Blackhawks and Cubs Talk podcast as well. James Neveau, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Yeah, kind of a crazy night for this to be taking place, right? I was going to join you guys a little bit earlier, and then, Jeff Passan decided to do what Jeff Passan does and kind of drop some breaking news on all of our heads. So I got to do all that good stuff for work this evening. And hey, there's nothing I'd rather be writing about than something
breaking
positive
news
involving the Chicago Cubs.
Was it the soft opening of Small Cheval where the old Joe Madden restaurant used to be?
I think it was actually the free giveaway that Obvious Shirts did today.
Yes,
that was the one that everybody asked me to do, but
So yeah, let's talk about it. You just wrote it up. Nico Hoerner signing a 3-year extension with the Cubs. Tell us about this deal and your thoughts on the Cubs actually extending a player.
Yeah, it's an incredibly rare thing. I think the last real contract extension they agreed to with a player that was already under the control was Kyle Hendricks, probably. I think that and the David Bodie deal both kind of dated back a little bit there. So I think Hendricks is the most recent, but they came into the offseason.
Bodie was the last natural born Cub. Hendricks had come over. So I guess this is you've talked about extending your own players that you drafted.
Yeah, I mean, they acquired Hendricks, from the Rangers, and before he had ever gotten to the big leagues. So I guess if we're going with the homegrown classification, then yes, you were absolutely correct. That is accurate, which is kind of a sad indictment of the organization that all the guys that they've developed, they have not been able to hold on to any of them. I think honestly, the contract, I was kind of prepared for it to maybe buy out an additional year or two of free agency, maybe not just a 1 year of it as it was. It's a 3-year deal for those who have not yet seen the news. $35 million buys out his remaining arbitration years and also buys out his first year of free agency. I thought that perhaps it would be a 4-year deal. I knew Nico was probably going to want to do some type of a bridge deal that would still enable him to hit free agency at a decent age. And I think that based on the way that he kind of profiles in terms of being a more contact-oriented hitter and being a solid defender, I think that being able to hit the market at 30 would have been good for him. Instead, he'll hit it 1 year earlier at 29. And I think that the Cubs just wanted to get something done with him before they left Mesa. And if I had to handicap it before we got to the regular season back when this was first kind of floated during Cubs convention, I would have thought for sure Hoerner was the more likely to get an extension than Ian Happ. And I think that's exactly how this has played out. And I think the deal is totally fair for a player of Happ's caliber. He can back up at shortstop, of course, and is going to be a really strong second baseman for the Cubs. I think this was a key thing for them to get done. It shows that they're serious about negotiating with players that they feel can help them in their next contention window. And I'm fully on board with this contract for sure.
But basically the Cubs bought 1 extra year of control, right? There are the 2, they bypass the 2 arbitration years and then they get 1 year beyond that. I guess that's what they consider a long-term deal these days, but yeah. Better that than nothing, I guess.
I wonder what the incentive would have been for Nico to go beyond 3 or 4 years. I think that in all likelihood, he was not going to sign an 8 or a 9 year deal worth, 10 to 11 million per season, right? I don't think that was going to be something he was going to want to do.
So it's 3 years, including the year we're starting now, or 3 years after this year? Do you know?
Jeff Passan made it sound like it was 3 years starting now, because I think that Hoerner was due to become a free agent, at the end of next season, was it? I'm trying to remember. I'm going to look up, on Spot Track while we're kind of talking about this. So,
and I'm sure he wants to be here for the 2025 championship season, right? I mean,
of course.
You'd hate to miss that.
He was due to become a free agent at the conclusion of the 2025 season. So that will actually, it looks like that will actually go through. So his deal this year will pay him it looks like $2.5 million. And then it looks like the new contract will kick in starting next season.
Okay.
So
good.
He'll be a free agent in the winter
years.
of 2026. Yep. They have him under team control for 4 more seasons.
So he'll be able to see back-to-back championships. That'll be a first for anybody born, in this century.
I like where your head's at, dude. I think you've got that exactly right.
And Ian Happ, on the other hand, is he going to walk at the end of the year, or are they going to trade him at the All-Star break? I guess there are 2 options, right?
I've been saying that I feel like he's probably going to be out of here. As to what time, I have no idea. We saw this team handled the Wilson Contreras situation where we kind of all assumed he was going to get traded at the deadline and then all of a sudden did not. And so I'm genuinely wondering if maybe the Cubs are just going to say, you know what, we're in contention this season. We'll hold on to Ian Happ till the end of the year and then let the chips fall where they may. But yeah, I never really thought that they were going to get too far down the road with Happ, especially when a guy like Manny Machado signs a contract extension. The free agent market this coming offseason is not going to be very good outside of, some dude named Shohei Ohtani. So
who's signing with the Dodgers? He is not signing here.
I keep saying that, dude. I've said that. I do a Cubs Talk podcast for NBC as well with Layla Rahimi and Nate Poppett, and I keep saying I think he's going to end up with the Dodgers. I think they've cleared enough contracts off their books that they're going to make a very serious run at that. So
I thought he came in. Jeremy. I thought the Cubs came in second in his initial efforts when they got beat out by the Los Angeles Angels. So therefore, technically, shouldn't we get him next? Is that how that works? No?
Well, Seiya Suzuki didn't get the opportunity to pitch him on the Cubs at the World Baseball Classic, so that's a missed opportunity there for the Cubs there, not having him be there to kind of give the pitch.
Yeah, well, he'll have plenty of other opportunities, let's hope, between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, we've got we've got plenty of time to speculate about roster moves for next season, but we've got roster moves for this
Jeremy,
season.
Would there even be room on the Cubs roster for Ohtani? If they could have him right now, you've been looking at the roster very carefully, I know. Do you see any spots on the roster for somebody of his ability?
Well, there's been some there's been some spots opened up. Let's talk about the moves that happened here for the opening day roster. As the Zach McKinstry era is over in Chicago. He was traded to the Tigers for minor league pitching prospect Carlos Guzman.
47 games with the Cubs is all he ended up mustering. So much for my preseason prediction that he was going to end up being like their regular third baseman because of his defense. Whoopsie.
and was that Chris Martin they gave up to the Dodgers to get him? Is that how we got him?
Nagel with the exact correct answer there. Nicely
done,
right?
Bud.
Yep.
I was pulling that out of my head. I'm like, I know he went to we got him from the Dodgers. I'm like, who could it have been? But Martin actually pitched really well with the Dodgers last year.
He sure did.
And now he is somewhere else, I assume. But all right.
Singing for Coldplay, I think.
That's my. I go straight to that every time. I think that whenever I hear that name, I think Coldplay.
So I guess the Cubs have one last chance to win that trade with this with this fine young pitcher they got back from the Tigers.
The other opening day roster moves. Assad is being assigned to the bullpen. We'll touch on that in a second. We've got a Twitter question. We'll talk about it there. We've got Torrens, Mastrobuoni, and Rucker on the Cubs MLB roster, but Christopher Morel is not. He's expected to start at AAA Iowa.
Was officially optioned to Iowa this afternoon, and Rowan Wick was waived this afternoon and also sent to Iowa. Yeah. So plenty of craziness happening out there at Cubs camp.
Hey, if that means if Assad is good enough to waive Wick, that's a sign of improvement, I think. No offense with this team, because they've been I think, hesitant to let go of veteran players who may or may not be at the end. And usually it's at the expense of younger players who then spend more time in the minors or at least on the bench. And I'd like to see, I feel like we're at the point now where Rowan Wick is not going to likely be part of your next championship team. So next guy up. Assad's 24 years old. Let's see what he has, frankly.
I do like having that MLB ready depth at the minor league level, though. So I think that being able to get Rowan Wick through waivers and then sent to Iowa, I think is ultimately good for the Cubs. And of course, they're going to have Cody Hoyer, who's also going to be potentially available later this season. So they've got a nice little stable going of kind of those MLB ready arms in the minor league. Should Rowan Wick be able to kick things back into gear, I think we can agree that he hasn't really been stellar the last few seasons. I think there's another gear he needs to be able to get to. And yeah, I was kind of assuming, like you, Pat, that he was just going to kind of coast onto the roster again. I know he's been on my predicted roster for some time now. But yeah, seeing him not be there kind of makes me think that, Javier Assad obviously earned that spot, with how well he's pitched this preseason. Maybe it means a Julian Merriweather and Anthony Kay also gets a crack at the roster. I definitely think it's a good thing for the Cubs that they have that kind of depth. They can make those types of decisions. And honestly, I think it was probably a good move by the team to send him down.
And maybe they value health too. He's been hurt, right? A lot. So, it's in the old days, we used to call that a 4A player, right? Do they still talk about like that? You say major league ready. I guess that's a nicer way of saying it.
Yeah, I guess in my day and age, we're more of the participation trophy era, right? Is that what millennials are known as? So perhaps that's the direction I'm going in.
It's also a bad sign that the Cubs can waive so many guys, and there's never a threat that anyone is going to jump on this. Like their guys clear waivers, no problem, every single time. It's a sign that the Cubs aren't. There's not a lot of things that are attractive to a lot of teams.
And even when they do get taken in like the Rule 5 draft, they get returned. Wasn't there a pitcher that went to Seattle and then ended up coming back because the Mariners were like, nah, we don't need that guy.
we perseverate over the bottom 3 or 4 spots on the roster quite a bit. Probably needlessly in some respects, but we do that when really I think our problem is not at the bottom 3 spots, it's at the top 10 spots. But that's another conversation for later, I suppose.
Well, we do have a Twitter question about the bottom spot of the rotation. At Apple Forever One asks on Twitter, longtime listener of the show, always glad when he asks a question. He says, will Assad be a starter at some point this season? Should he have been the 5th starter? James, what do you think? Would you have? Do you have Wisniewski slotted in that spot right now?
I did. I think that Javier Assad, of course, pitched really well for the Cubs in spring training, was absolutely fantastic with Team Mexico in the World Baseball Classic. I felt like most preseasons he would have done enough to earn a spot in the Cubs rotation, but I got to be honest, guys, there's probably not a ton of swing and miss stuff in this rotation right now, or even on the pitching staff as a whole. And Wisniewski just gives you that element day in, day out. That dude has got such filthy movement on his pitches. His slider is absolutely electric. He's been controlling it beautifully in Arizona. I feel like he absolutely earned that starter role. I frankly am surprised that the Cubs are going to keep Assad in the bullpen, not because he doesn't deserve to be there, because I think we all agree he's looked really good. I'm really shocked that they want to have him, Keegan Thompson, and Edward Alzolay all in the mix in the bullpen. It almost seems like they're all kind of the same type of pitchers who can go multiple innings and throw right-handed. And it just seemed to me that they maybe would have been better off having another guy like an Anthony Kay, just because their bullpen is so heavily right-handed. I'm almost surprised they didn't go with a guy like Kay or perhaps a Mark Leiter Jr. who had really good reverse splits last season. I'm a little bit surprised that they held on to Assad as well as Thompson and Alzolay. But of course, all of this is just going to end up changing, and I'm sure they can option Assad back down if they want to keep him stretched out. But I think with the health of Kyle Hendricks potentially possibly, turning around and him maybe rejoining the rotation at some point. Maybe the Cubs just didn't see a real open avenue for Assad to jump back into the rotation. And so they decided that they'd rather explore their options with him as a bullpen arm right now. I'm just a little bit surprised that's the direction they decided to take.
Well, and with Keegan Thompson's velocity down, you might want to hedge that Keegan Thompson might not be in your bullpen, and you might need a guy like Assad to fill that role.
I'm a little bit surprised they kept having him pitch. Like, if the velocity dip was enough to suggest an injury, the Cubs had tended to play it really cautiously with injuries during spring training. I'm a little bit surprised that they wouldn't have shut him down. Like, that's kind of where my question lies with Keegan Thompson, is if the Cubs genuinely thought he was kind of battling through an injury, what's the incentive to not shut him down and get him healthy?
I'm actually glad the Cubs kept Assad on the major league team, because I think we're at the point where it's time to start rewarding success. Enough with potential, enough with, past history, enough with a lot of that stuff. Who's able to perform now? And he has shown that he is, and he's ready. And like say they give him a shot. They're in, like you said, James, they are in a unique position in that, unlike most of the last couple of years, and they've had several empty spots in their rotation, this year they happen to start the season with 5 starters. But as we know, with injuries and other things that happen throughout the year, that probably won't stay. So either they will stretch him out and, convert him into starting, or, I could see a scenario where they do a piggyback game someday and he gets to pitch part of it. Or they could do what I think the Dodgers and a lot of other teams have done successfully lately, which is get these guys with great stuff that come in and are really good pitchers and work them in, start them in relief, and then turn them into starters down the road. That's something they didn't used to do in the old days, but it's the old days, meaning my days, the 90s. But you've seen that quite successfully with quite a few pitchers in the last 3 or 4 years, where you've seen them start off as relievers basically, but they were people who you sort of thought as starters, from the beginning. And maybe they do that, and maybe that's the strategy. But I like the idea of having good arms in the pen. I agree with you that they need a left-handed pitcher, another left-handed pitcher, but that seems to be something that they'll have to work on as time, expires. And we don't know next year if Marcus Stroman's going to return with the team and Smiley and other things. So I mean, I think they do need to find out soon, like who do they have that's actually ready to perform in the next year or two. So.
Yeah. And then, of course, that group will include Caleb Killian, who was sent down fairly early. And I'd imagine we haven't seen the last of Adrian Sampson either. Like, I think that he had a really rough spring, but I still think that he had a good enough body of work last season where I think we may end up seeing Sampson again in the rotation at some point this season. We may,
although, he is, 31? So, his window is starting to close a little bit. Let's hope
he's the Frank Schwindel of the pitching rotation. Right. The window's going to slam shut.
Yeah.
One more question. His last thought. He was mad we haven't touched on the beer bat announcement coming to Wrigley Field. That they'll be selling beer bats. Definitely wanted to get your thoughts on that, James. As an avowed
supporter,
as someone who who can partake in a.
I'm glad you mentioned this, Jeremy, because my bosses at NBC approached me because they remembered the Instagram posts I made last year when I went to a Rocky Mountain Vibes game in Colorado Springs. And I immediately gravitated toward the beer bats as a wonderful addition to the ballpark repertoire of food and drink items. I also have a beer bat that I bought from the Myrtle Beach Pelicans as well. So I am a massive supporter of the beer bat. The question I really had was, how will the bleacher bums create a cup snake with beer bats? And is that something that will ultimately be possible? And what would you guys' moral stance on that issue be?
I view this as an advertisement for that old Saturday Night Live skit, the bad idea jeans. These bats will be used for no good. They'll be used for purposes of evil. the key number one will be keeping the bats off the field, right? Key number two will be keeping the bats from making contact with items that then hit the field. And I feel like there are going to be cups that are going to end up on the field because people are going to be swinging beer bats at them. And at first it'll be empty cups, and people will think that's funny. And then it'll be cups with a little bit of liquid in them because it's like they go further. Before you know it, in the ninth inning, you're going to see some full beers hit with a beer bat, and it's going to go splat.
There's going to be a fabulous moment where somebody's going to try to throw a home run ball back, and instead of just throwing it, they're going to try to hit it with a beer bat.
That's 100% going to happen.
You know they will. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I'm not on the no fun train like Pat is, so I am all about the bad decisions that'll ultimately be made with those beer bats, and I hope to get one before they go away.
I was at Randy Myers poster day the day he came in the ninth inning and blew the save, and everybody took their posters and threw it on the field. So I've lived this. I have a lived experience here. I know how this works. And
so you're insisting that this is going to be the Cubs version of Disco Demolition Night? Is that what you're saying?
They used to give out little wooden bats at games. They gave out a lot of things at games, but those are projectiles, and they stopped doing that. That's why they stopped giving out cans, and they started putting beer in cups because they couldn't trust people with cans. And Jeremy, you remember Bears games? Same deal, right? They would pour it, or they'd give you those. I think they had those plastic.
You couldn't even have the caps. Yeah, no, like the
right.
No,
they won't give you the caps because they're afraid that you could put the cap back on, and then throw it and hurt people. So.
Yeah, I just worry for my own personal use. If I see a bat option for Three Floyd's Gumball Head, then I'm gonna be in trouble. Like that's gonna be a long day at the ballpark for me.
I don't need to go to you trade Ian half before the disaster strikes because I don't want him to get hurt with these beer bats and they don't get some compensation for him.
Well, I count me on Team Beer Bats. I'm all about this because, frankly, gentlemen, you guys have known me long enough. I'm just Team Chaos, dude.
Yeah,
give me all of it.
Yeah.
Let's revisit in 2 weeks or 2 months. How about that? 2 months from now. Let's see where we're at.
We'll see. This is like
Mr. Team Chaos wants to keep Rowan Wick for 30 years, but he's happy to have projectiles in the bleachers.
Listen, bro, I love the idea that we could have potentially had Rowan Wick, Brad Wick, and Jordan Wicks. Like, how fun would that have been? Like,
I don't know. Would they have won any games? I guess it depends.
In all likelihood, they would have blown them out.
We've got one other piece of news to get to, and that is Fox Sports list that came out for the MLB 26 and under power rankings. The MLB 26 and under power rankings. The Cubs on this list ranked 24th out of 30 teams.
Does this include people who are at the major league level as well as the minor leagues?
It does. It is.
So it's the whole system.
It's encompassing of people, no matter where they are in the system. If they're 26 and under, they are counted.
So Pete Armstrong counts on this list.
Correct.
And he wasn't enough to put the Cubs in the top 10?
The top 10 would annoy you because
they're all in our division.
The St. Louis Cardinals are at number 10. The Los Angeles Dodgers at number 7. Don't forget the San Diego Padres at number 9.
How do they have any talent left?
Because all of their talent is like that age, right? Like Fernando Tatis and Juan Soto, like all those guys are pretty dang young.
But it's crazy because, the Houston Astros, the Atlanta Braves, I was told the only way you could get good young players was to be bad. None of these teams in the top 10, none of the teams I just listed in the top 10, there are some bad teams up there. Your Baltimore's,
they're not going to be bad for long. They've got they actually do have good prospects coming up through there. But
most of these teams in the top 10 were good, have been good, continue to be good. And that's what's really disheartening is we've seen a lot of losing because we were told this is how you get good young players. And I'm watching the Cubs show up on these power rankings way down below the White Sox at 23, And just
that's such a joke, by the way. The White Sox system is so depleted right now.
Well, it counts Luis Robert and people like that, right? And all the guys in the majors. So
yep.
The Cubs, by the way, have 4 major league players who are under 27 years old. To your point, Jeremy, that doesn't feel like a rebuild, but here we are. Those 4 players, can you name them, James? What 4 Cubs?
The 4 players who are under 25?
Under 27.
Oh, under 27. It had to be Nico Hoerner.
Yes.
How is Dansby Swanson on that list?
He's
Dansby
30,
Swanson
right?
is not.
Yeah, I think he's like.
No, he's 30. I didn't realize he was that old.
I think he's when was 29 or 30, right?
When was he a top draft pick? Good Lord, man.
I remember when he was top draft pick. He actually, I think Swanson.
I think like 2015.
Swanson,
I think
is like 29, right? Isn't he 29?
I'm looking it up right now. Dansby Swanson is. He was born in 1994, so he's 29.
Just turned 29.
Yep.
Turned 29. So he was coming out of college when he got picked. So I got Nico Hoerner.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of like who else on the list would be. I mean,
we talked about a couple of them. 2 of them are pitchers, and we just talked about
Yeah. Hayden Wesneski, of course.
Yep. And
Justin Steele?
No, he's 27.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man.
But we did talk about the other pitcher just a few minutes ago. He made the roster.
Oh, Javier Assad.
Not Rowan Wick. That's my age. Yes.
What about? Well, I guess technically Christopher Morel's not on the roster anymore. Correct. So
there's one more player. There's one more you're missing.
Seems like it probably is like blindingly obvious.
It's a high impact. No, it's a high impact young player you're missing. He doesn't feel that young, but he is. He's well seasoned.
Adbert Alzolay. No, he's 28.
It's easy to miss this guy because you have to look.
You would never
closely.
think he's that young.
It's just hard to see him because he's so small.
Oh, Nick Madrigal.
Yes.
How old is Nick Madrigal? He feels older than 26.
He is 26.
Wow.
He was. What year was he drafted by the White Sox? Was it 2019?
Man.
Yeah, probably.
Nick
right.
Madrigal.
He was the number 4. I think he was the number 4.
He debuted in 2020.
Yeah, I want to say he was drafted in 2018, the number 4 overall pick.
He just turned 26 a couple days ago.
Just turned 26.
Yeah.
Well, see, this list, I was just looking over the Fox list while we were talking about this.
Now you know why the Cubs are ranked so low.
They didn't have guys like Caleb Killian listed. Christian Hernandez wasn't listed. Like, there are players who could potentially make an impact in the Cubs system. They're just not, like, there in terms of being, like, top 100 guys yet. So
they haven't made any impact whatsoever, so that's why they're not on there. Like, Christian Hernandez is taking a couple batting practice swings, but I was gonna say,
I feel like that dude has been talked about for 19 years already. Like,
they got him when he was 12 though. So
feels like Jim Hendry signed him. Like, that's like, I thought he signed him at the same time they got Jorge Soler. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the issue that we've talked about a lot, which is the Cubs have what they perceive to be a deep system, but it's still a young system. So we don't have any proven talent at a high level yet, including for most of them AAA even. But
have any of the players they acquired for you, Darvish, even come close to like AAA yet?
They're still in high school, right?
No one's come close to AAA. Like PCA's never come close to AAA, and none of them have
fair.
None of them are at that point yet. These are guys who either have a taste at AA or are doing well on high A or A and are hopefully going to move up this year to AA. So I think we'll know a lot more by the end of the year. But when you look at it objectively right now, and you look at, unfortunately, the Cardinal system where it's like, oh, here are all the top 10 overall prospects they have who are on the cusp of major league, and some of them are now joining the major league team. That's, to me, the depressing part, is to see a team like the Cardinals getting better. A team that has better on-field talent than the Cubs, i.e. Goldschmidt, Arenado, and others, continually now, for the third year in a row, bringing in new young players who seem to be doing pretty well from the minors to augment that. And they've been able to do that. And, I just named for you the Cubs young players. So you tell me if that's keeping up, with competition. It's just, the Cardinals have some really this Walker kid, that they are going to bring up this year. People like the Lars Nootbaar guy. You've got the
Tyler
O'Neill's of the world.
Yeah.
And you've got Nolan Gorman, who's 22. So I mean, it's that what I think excites people in their part of the world is that they have a bunch of young guys, and they're like, wow, Brendan Donovan, and maybe Dylan Carlson. I mean, they've just got like we have our Morel, and they've got like 5 of them. and
all I know is Cardinals acquiring Jordan Montgomery will never cease to infuriate me.
Yeah,
that's what they do. That's what they do. Getting Arenado for free is completely insane.
Yeah, basically got paid to take Nolan Arenado from the Rockies. Boy, that would have been nice for the Cubs to get in on that bandwagon.
What did they give up for Goldschmidt, really? I mean, and then he has a renaissance in his 30s, of course, in the post-PED world, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, man.
Anyway.
I don't even remember who they gave up. It was like, I think it was, Luke Weaver and Carson Kelly, I think were like the two. They were like the two main pieces of that deal.
Yep.
All right, well, that's enough of our Cardinals podcast. Moving on.
Makes me sad.
Depressing Cardinals podcast.
Yeah, no. Let's look ahead to the Cubs regular season. They're going to play baseball that matters. And
nice.
That starts on this Thursday on March 30th. I hate home games in March. That seems always terrible. Here they are, March 30th, playing the Milwaukee Brewers in the opening series. Pat, you're going to be in attendance at the home opener.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's this week. Wow, time flies. I will be at opening day. As I have every year since my first opening day in 1994, which was the Tuffy Rhodes game. I was sold immediately. And the only ones I missed have been the COVID year. So I'm looking forward to it.
We are the opposite, where I quit going to opening days after Greg Maddux gave up all those home runs on opening day when it was so cold out. And
to the Pirates that one day.
To the Pirates, and I was freezing in the bleachers, and I said, let's never do this again.
I've been to some very memorable opening days. That was one of them. Another was the Tuffy Rhodes 3 home runs off Dwight Gooden. Cubs lost that game, however. I was at the Kosuke Fukudome 9th inning dramatic home run off Eric Gagne. Cubs lost that game in the 10th. Kerry Wood blew the save. Most of them have turned out poorly, although I've been to a couple blowouts on opening day. That's been fun, like where the Cubs have actually won. So last year was a fun game. Kyle Hendricks, in his last Kyle Hendricks-esque start that I've been to, maybe the last one I ever will go to, he shut down the Brewers, and I got to watch Christian Yelich flail at pitches in the 9th inning, like he had a blindfold on, and in what was day one of his 7-year contract.
And James, how excited are you for opening day to finally be here?
Oh, I mean, as always, like it should be a national holiday, you would almost think, right? Like it's amazing.
People I work with think it is because I take it off every year.
For the record, I think the last Cubs opening day I went to the 2016 season opener for the Cubs at Wrigley. The last opening day game I went to for the Cubs was in 2005 when they blew out the Arizona Diamondbacks 16-6 at Chase Field. That was an experience and a half.
2016 was the Addison Russell 3-run home run, wasn't it? The night game.
Sure. I do believe that was, yeah.
It's a Reds.
It kickstarted all the good vibes for that year's team. But I think that with all the moves they've made this offseason, and I think all the excitement just kind of around their system, I feel like this year's opening day, they always come with like the optimism in Cubs fandom, where we're always like kind of giddily, optimistic that maybe we're wrong and they'll prove the naysayers wrong, et cetera, et cetera. This year, at least, there seems to be like some sort of a valid reason for optimism. I think guys like Hayden Wesneski, Dansby Swanson, Nico Hoerner, I feel like those types of guys, realistically, they give you a shot to be a much better club than they were last season. I am under no illusions. This team is definitely still flawed. I think there's plenty of questions about their offense, but I can't help but be optimistic that they're at least trending in the right direction. It seems like in a lot of ways. I just want to finally see it put into action and, put all these kind of power rankings where they're 24th in the league in young talent, put that to rest and start to see some of these guys play in meaningful games. I can't help but get kind of wistful and optimistic about baseball on opening day. I'm pumped and excited for it. And I do think the Cubs they'll be a better team this year and definitely going to be an interesting one to watch.
I think the biggest difference – go ahead, Jerry. I was just going to say real quick, I think the biggest difference this year from the last couple of years is I look at a starting rotation where I feel like every day out the Cubs have a chance of winning, and I haven't always felt like that with some of our starters. So I'm a lot more optimistic knowing that the Cubs probably won't be last in the league in innings pitched by starters, and that they actually will be in some games. Now, the part that I haven't come to terms with yet is that the realist in me thinks this team's going to really struggle to score runs.
Oh,
really, really, really struggle, especially without Suzuki. I mean, it could get really ugly. They could be shut out like a dozen times this year. It's going to be really bad, I think. I worry. But I do think the pitching's good, and it is nice to see Wisniewski and other people start to develop and think that, hey, here's some pieces for the future for change rather than just guys who are going to flip.
Yep.
We talked about it we talked about it on the prediction episode last week. We think this team is going to really struggle to score runs. You lost your best offensive player, and
no question,
and you replaced him with Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger, and so that is if Dansby Swanson's your best player, your team is not good. That's not great. So. This team is really we're gonna sit through a lot of 3-1 losses. We're like that feeling, like that season where they lost in the wild card game to the Rockies. That's where when they would fall down by like 1 or 2 runs, it felt insurmountable.
I thought of scoring in that game. Yeah.
I will point out, however, that team still had Chris Bryant and Javi Baez and Anthony Rizzo, and they still struggled down the stretch to score runs. So I guess it's not always about the so-called elite talent. It's just the ability to score runs in different ways, maybe. And I think maybe that's something they've explored at least a little bit with some of these moves.
I think that team also played 72 games in 26 days or something. I remember something like that. It's in my memory, but
that seems about right.
Yeah, but I think to Jeremy's point, if Dansby Swanson's your best player, you're terrible. But if he's your 5th best player, you could win this division, right? And if Hayden Wisniewski at the end of the year is a rock star, or Justin Steele takes another step up, or Nico Hoerner, or frankly the one we were really hoping for, Suzuki, that he seemed the one most primed to take a step up. And let's say you go out and get a couple free agents in the offseason that are better than Dansby Swanson. Now all of a sudden, as your 5th best player, he fits right in, like with the Braves. Yep. Oftentimes he was the 5th or 6th best player.
And looking ahead, I'm excited for this schedule here. So now we get to see some wacky. We've seen a pattern in MLB schedule making for a long time. This is out the window now, and you've got the Brewers to open, then you've got at Cincinnati, then at home for Texas and Seattle, before going out west in April for LA, the Dodgers version, and Oakland A's, then coming home to play the Dodgers and San Diego, finishing at Miami.
We can see Corey Seager. We can see Corey Seager followed by Julio Rodriguez in the same week.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of cool. I think.
Are you guys planning on any road trips to take advantage of the new scheduling this season?
I think so. I think that will, I will be. A lot of the road trips depends on what my London plans are.
Yes.
Anytime I'm traveling, the first thing I'm doing is pulling up the schedule to see if there's a Cubs opportunity nearby. And can we push that a week? And look how this lines up now.
I am looking forward to going out to California. I'm going out there for the series against the Padres and the Angels, and I'm not following them up the coast to play the Giants, but I always love those California swings and getting to check out some ballparks I haven't spent enough time in. So
Petco
I
is
do
one of my
appreciate
favorite
that.
ballparks. I love that
I
place.
went there for World Baseball Classic and absolutely loved it. I am so excited to go back and see the Padres and the Cubs there, and then fingers crossed, hoping against hope, I'll get to see Shohei Ohtani pitch for the Angels in LA. Can we please make that happen?
And something I always like to do, recommend to anyone listening, when you do go out of town, even if the baseball team is not in town, take a ballpark tour. A lot of times if the team's out of town, you can do a ballpark tour for like $15-20. And it's great. I did the Petco Park tour, and it's phenomenal. You get to go out on the field, get to go in the dugouts, the clubhouses, you get to see all the facilities, and it's always a tremendous time. I've done that at quite a few ballparks, and always recommend it if you're in town and there's no game to be seen. Always try to do that as well.
At Yankees, by the way, in July, FYI. That's a fun one.
That's another good one. I was kind of bummed they didn't go to Seattle this year. I was looking to go to Seattle, but maybe next year.
Yeah, that's my work trips are Seattle, so I can. I was looking for that too.
Could we go to Toronto? They're allowing free travel.
Oh yeah,
now, right?
Toronto.
Canada?
Yeah, Toronto's a great time too. I love Toronto. That's in August. They're playing at Toronto.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm so glad, frankly, that the Cubs are not just playing a slew. And as somebody who goes to a lot of home games and has had season tickets for a billion years, the 4 series against the Reds and the 4 series against the Pirates, that's 8 series. It really feels like it's hard to go an entire week at home without playing either the Reds or the Pirates. And those teams are boring. And I know it's nice because they suck and the Cubs can usually win, but still. And even the Cardinals, that's kind of passé for me. I'm tired of the Cardinals fans. I really am looking forward to having other teams come here and for the Cubs being able to go to other cities. I think it'll just be more fun for a change pace. Although I think it's going to hurt the Cubs record-wise.
Yeah.
But
did you know the Cubs only play 1 series in St. Louis this season? They only play 3 games at Busch Stadium.
That's just fine.
Yeah.
Okay, great. They played it.
All right. If that's, I don't disagree. I just think it's funny. I think they play more games at Petco Park than they do at Busch Stadium, which is very odd.
It's very, very weird. There's a lot of quirks,
trip, right?
Yeah. That is correct. Those are technically Cardinals home games.
So I used to go to Cubs Cardinals games in St. Louis, especially when Sosa was at his peak. But I haven't been to a Cardinals game in quite a while, just because you end up having to go to St. Louis. And it's just, that's the one part that is sort of a sticking point, really, the whole thing is having to go there.
That's fair.
But
what's your favorite visiting ballpark then? What's your favorite visiting ballpark you've been to?
Well, the easiest is obviously Milwaukee.
Sure.
/ White Sox, I guess.
San Francisco is my favorite.
San Francisco is very nice. I still like Camden. I know it's not the new shining thing, but I go to a lot of games out there. I kind of like the Pittsburgh Stadium. Kind of cozy. It's a nice little cozy place.
Hard to get a ticket.
Phenomenal
right?
view
Tough to get a ticket.
And I just
stadiums I'm not a big fan of. Like speaking of other places, apart from like Cincinnati, would be. I'm not a big fan of the Kansas City Royal Stadium. That was kind of And Miami was I went to their new stadium with high hopes, but it was pretty cookie cutter and empty. I don't know. What do you think, James?
Well, you go to Washington games a lot, right?
I
go
do.
To that stadium.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Nationals Park. I've never been there, but
it's a different vibe when you quasi live in a city too, because it's just a different familiarity and you're going with different people as opposed to like a true road trip. My favorite road game of all time was one of them was my favorite was against the
Indians Game 7,
Cleveland. Yeah, Game 7. But one of my favorites for other reasons, non-Cubs related, was I went to Minnesota for Game 2 of their season, sat by an old plate, the year before they moved into their new stadium. And they did this big thing after the bottom of the fifth where they said, oh, it's an official game. We're this many games away from our new stadium. And I remember that night, it was about 36 degrees and snowing outside. And we're in the dome, right? And no one even had a coat on because they just came from the parking garage. I'm thinking, are you people for real? Like, do you realize if you had your new stadium right now, how freaking miserable you'd be? Because I do, because I go to Cubs games in this weather all the time. And you're here in short sleeve shirts cheering about your new open air stadium. I'm like, good luck to you, folks.
I thought the Twins had gone mental when they opened an outdoor stadium. I could not believe it. And yet I'll be there in May checking out the Cubs there. So I will
bring
work
extra
back
layers.
on my Target Field experience. Yeah. I do not share your distaste for Cincinnati. I actually kind of like the area around the ballpark, and the ballpark itself. They've got like decent beer and food there. I think that I wouldn't say it's my favorite by any stretch, but it's at least, a decent experience and not that far of a drive from where we live. I definitely say my favorite visiting fan experience and just the stadium in general has been Pittsburgh so far. I loved PNC Park. The views in that stadium are outstanding, like the river and the skyline and everything. And the people there were super friendly. I really enjoyed my whole experience in Pittsburgh. Of course, I enjoyed going to Boston, like all the history around the Cubs and the Red Sox. And I happened to get to go the year after the Cubs won the World Series. So everybody in Boston was like slapping you on the back and congratulating you and saying, hey, isn't it great to finally end the stupid curse? Like they were fantastic that season. So I really enjoyed it
too.
Loved Boston. Place. Yeah. So, oh God, it's such a fun city. I definitely want to go back there. So I'd say Pittsburgh and Boston have probably been my favorites. And then in terms of least favorites, I generally don't like going to Cubs games at Chase Field in Phoenix. The fans are very resentful. It's kind of like the Milwaukee experience where Brewer fans kind of hate that you're invading their ballpark. Diamondback fans are the exact same way.
I figured
it's already our city. Don't we already own that city, I thought, because that's where we have spring training?
Well, and that's where all our old people move. So I figured that's
you would think, right? But they seem legit resentful. It's weird.
Coors is not bad, and that has a lot of Cubs fans. Denver. That's a decent place if you're staying in downtown Denver. It's an easy place to get to. The place that Jeremy, I'm sadly, I know you would have loved, but alas, you were just a little bit too young, was
Montreal
Olympic Stadium.
It's one of my biggest. I'm sad that I never got to experience it.
It is your white
one
whale.
Of my favorites. Yeah,
would have been great. I was just on the I was a couple years away from like really being able to have a good old Montreal time, and it just didn't work out for me. But yeah, darn. All right. Well, with that, we've got looking ahead. Cubs play the Brewers. What do you think? 2 out of 3? Is that doable for this Cubs team? The Brewers did not get significantly better this offseason. They are trending down.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that Christian Yelich got older. Is that right?
Every year. It's amazing.
Wow. The Cubs are going to go up against 3 tough pitchers, aren't they? Like Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta.
They are.
I assume.
Yes. That's every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
do you think they can go 2 out of 3?
Yeah, sure.
Look at their roster. Like their starting catcher is William Contreras. Their starting first baseman, Rowdy Tellez, and Luis Urias is playing third base. They don't really have that great of an offense. Like
no.
I think that if the Cubs are going to take 2 out of 3 at Wrigley from anybody this season with kind of the offensive questions that we've brought up and that you guys especially have brought up, it might be this Brewers team. I feel like the Cardinals are by far the class of the division. I feel like we probably will underestimate the Brewers. I think they'll maybe do a little bit better than we think, but I look at that lineup. I am frankly not intimidated by it. So I think if there's an opportunity for the Cubs to eke out a couple like 2-1, 3-2 victories, this might be the series to do it. So I'm going to go 2 out of 3 for the Cubs against Milwaukee.
I mean, that's what the Cubs did last year to start the season against Milwaukee. Same 3 pitchers, right?
There you go.
So, I mean, it's very doable. I will note that among, if you just went by OPS plus, the top 3 hitters in the lineup for the Brewers last year were Hunter Renfroe, traded, Colton Wong, gone. Keaston Hira, gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was Rowdy Tellez tied with Keaston, but at 115. But they've lost significant part of their offense. I do think that Willie Adames is a good player and will probably get better. Which of course has been. You're right. I mean, their lineup just doesn't scare you, does it? But that pitching, those top three pitchers in particular, the three we have to face. Although if you're going to face those three, I was talking to a Milwaukee fan the other day. He's like, well, his concern was from the opposite perspective. He's like, yeah, but it's the first three games of the season. We'll each pitch like 4 or 5 innings. They'll have to go straight to the bullpen, and we don't have Hader anymore. So everybody's kind of stretched. It goes back a slot, right? It's great that they have Williams, but he's not the setup man, right? So if that's true, and if they are going to baby these guys, especially in cold weather, and they're only going to let them pitch, maybe 5 innings, that is a huge advantage for the Cubs, because I do think the Cubs, if we can, get their top starters out of there, it's going to be hard. It'll be much more advantageous for us.
Nice.
All right, last question from me, James, then we're going to call it a podcast. Is NBC going to send you to the new Small Cheval at Wrigley and have you compare the Small Cheval offerings there to maybe the one downtown by the river to then big regular Au Cheval? Should you try all 3 burgers, James, to really get a good perspective?
Boy, I wish that was in the budget. I wish that was in the cards, but I did not get sent to the food offerings of Wrigley Field. I suppose I'm just going to have to do it myself, which, you know what, I will happily take that assignment.
Yeah, for those who have not had the burger, the Au Cheval burger is one of my favorites. It's getting world renowned at this point. Small Cheval is a smaller version of the restaurant where they only offer fries, burger, shake, done. Like that's it. It's a very limited menu, and usually the burgers are. They range in consistency to the same way regular Au Cheval does, but it's still a amazing, rock solid burger. Go out of your way to try it if you have not had it.
I looked through the window today as I was outside walking down the street around lunchtime, and it wasn't open, but I saw the people inside working and getting it ready, and I thought to myself, "Oh, can I go tomorrow?" When is it open? So I'm going to try to go tomorrow if I can.
Excellent. And with that, we're going to wrap it up this week. James, thanks again for coming on to talk Cubs with us. Always a great time. Time flies by when we're having a great time talking with you. Please remind our listeners where they can find all of your work and how they can follow you on Twitter.
Do want to apologize to you and Pat for getting on so late. The Nico Hoerner thing, I'm the only one working on the digital desk for both NBC Chicago and NBC Sports Chicago this evening. So had to pull a little bit of double duty there. You can read, I'm writing a lot about the Cubs on NBC Sports Chicago if you guys want to check that out. I also co-host the Cubs Talk podcast with Layla Rahimi and Nate Poppin. Also co-hosting the Blackhawks Talk podcast with Pat Boyle and Charlie Romeliotis as well. So a lot of Cubs, a lot of Blackhawks, and just get to cover sports, man. It's so much fun. I'm so grateful to get to do it. And again, I love talking Cubs with you guys. We've been talking for 7-8 years at this point. Like it's amazing how fast time flies, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Well, thank you for coming on, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well at Wrigleyville Nat. You can continue to support this show. We are able to be ad-free for 5th or 6th season now because of our support from our listeners over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. There, anything you contribute to us, it goes right back to pay for our hosting fees, to pay for any mic cables, to pay for everything. 100% goes right back into this show, and we're able to keep this ad-free. As soon as that number dips down, then you start to hear the familiar commercials start to creep back in, and so let's try to keep that at the level where we don't have to bring on a sponsor and we continue to be ad-free for another season. So thank you to all the patrons who continue to support the show and all the new patrons that are joining. Go to patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation for that. And if you can't support the show financially, you can always Tell your Cubs fan friends about the podcast. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast. We're available on any podcatcher of choice. The entire back catalog, all the links to subscribe, everything's available at our website, WrigleyvilleNation.com. And we will be launching... We've much like Small Cheval, we've got a soft launch of our YouTube channel where we'll be putting up video versions of this podcast. So get ready for those to come out here, probably starting with the opening day. So next week's episode hopefully will be the first one to debut on the channel. Our patrons got a sneak preview of it last week. So hopefully we'll be launching that. So if you want to search for Wrigleyville Nation podcast, right now it's just the audio versions, but you can give us a subscribe there as well. Help us build up that channel. So with that, we're calling it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Oh, before we go, I have to give you the moment of Zen here. It's an observation and a prediction. The observation is, did you know that Christian Yelich has now had 3 poor seasons with Milwaukee, and he only had 2 very good seasons before that? I didn't realize that. Also, I am predicting that he grounds into his 100th career double play this week. So keep an eye out for that. He's at 99.
I was going to ask you, is he at like 85 or something? Like
He's at 99. Ever since I put the and Jeremy, you can go back through the tape if you want to get some clips of this. When I put the curse on him before the 2020 season, people laughed.
They did,
but here we are.
They no longer laugh; they fear your wrath. That's what that is.
He's only got 6 more years left on his deal.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.